Welcome back to Al Chapo Sports, everyone's least favorite sports show where we do the thinking so you don't have to. Power 5 for 5, Week 11. Let's get into it real quick because Week 12 is happening as we speak. Alright, starting with the Pac-12. Number 5, we've got USC. They are 7-4. They lost to Oregon. They're losing. They're on the downward trend, but they're still head and shoulders above the rest of the conference. Number 4, Utah, 7-3. They lost to Washington. And this also goes for USC's case. USC and Utah lost to the two best teams in the conference, easily, Oregon and Washington. So, we cut them a little slack. Number 3, Oregon State. They're 8-2. They got a win over Stanford. Stanford, not a great opponent, but it is what it is. Oregon State's 8-2, and they got conference wins for days, baby. So, good job, Beavers. Number 2, Oregon, 9-1. They got the victory over USC, as previously mentioned. Their only loss on the season is to number 1, Washington, 10-0. No one dropped from the rankings this week. Moving on to the ACC. Number 5, we've got Duke, 6-4. They lost to North Carolina. Their dreaded rival lost to them in overtime. Duke started the season hot, and then they've been consistently going downhill since. But they're still clinging on to that number 5 spot. Number 4, we've got North Carolina State, who is 7-3. They got a win over Wake Forest. It's a conference win. Good for them. They're 7-3. They're on the upward swing, whereas Duke is on the downward swing. Number 3, UNC. They are 8-2. They just beat their most dreaded in-conference rival in Duke, so good for them. But they can't seem to get quite past the upper brass of this conference, which is number 2, Louisville. They got a win against Virginia. They are 9-1. Virginia sucks, straight up, and Virginia put a fight to Louisville, but they still won. Louisville has this tendency. You look at their record, you think they're incredible, but they squeak by in almost every single game. And they're not playing the top caliber of opponents. So, that is why Louisville is number 2. And number 1, Florida State, 10-0, undefeated. They've been here all season. I think they're the only team that's maintained, well, other than Georgia, maintained their number 1 spot in the conference the entire season. 10-0, they beat Miami in a battle of Florida. No one dropped from the rankings in the ACC. Moving on, the Big 12. Number 5, we've got West Virginia. They are 6-4. They lost to Oklahoma, who's one of the better teams of a conference, but they're still better than any other team I have below them. So, moving on to number 4, Kansas State. Kansas State is 7-3. They got a win against Baylor. It's a good win. Baylor's a very middle of a road team. They're even on the bad side, but 7-3 is 7-3. You are bowl eligible and then some, baby. Let's see how they fare against Kansas next week. That'll really separate some of the boys from the men. Number 3, Oklahoma. They are 8-2. They got a win over West Virginia, as previously mentioned. West Virginia is a very solid team all around, so good for them for getting the win. They've only got 2 losses. Good on you, Sooners. Number 2, Kansas. They are 7-3. They lost to Texas Tech. Not a good loss, but I still have Kansas over Oklahoma because they beat Oklahoma. There's only one difference in their game, in their record, so I feel comfortable keeping Kansas at 2. Number 1, Texas. They are 9-1. They got a win over TCU. Their only loss on the season is to Oklahoma, who is a solid team in their own right. Texas is currently the favorite for the Big 12 to have a playoff contender. Dropping from the rankings this week is Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, on paper, has a better record than number 5 West Virginia University. But they got the fucking shit kicked out of them by nobody. By a tiny-ass little, not very good team. So, the wild inconsistency alone gets Oklahoma State booted from these rankings. They were on the quiet rise. They even beat Oklahoma. But then to get turned around and dominated, that'll get you out of here real quick. Moving on to the Big Ten. Starting at number 5, we've got Maryland. They are 6-4. They got a win over Nebraska. Maryland's just okay. Most of the Big Ten conference is just okay or bad, except for the top few. They are a very top-heavy conference. Number 4, Iowa, 8-2. They got a win over Rutgers. Iowa's the outside man looking in. They are the only hope of the Big Ten West, and even so, they're going to get smashed by the Big Ten East champion. But they're 8-2, so nothing to take away from them. Number 3, Penn State. They are 8-2. They lost to the Mac Daddy themselves, Michigan. Penn State will always be like Iowa on the outside looking in. They will always watch Michigan and Ohio State play for best, and then Penn State will reluctantly take home their little bronze medal. Moving on to number 2, Ohio State. They are 10-0. They got a win over, who did they play? Is that Michigan State? Michigan State's a terrible team. They should win, which is why they are number 2, not number 1, because their win this week was over a crap team, whereas number 1, Michigan, also 10-0, got a win over a good team, being Penn State. Dropping from the rankings this week was Rutgers after their loss to Iowa. Moving on to the SEC. Number 5, we've got LSU, 7-3. They got a win over Florida. Florida's pretty middle of a pack team in the SEC, but LSU is a good team. I think they're a better team than their record indicates. Moving on to number 4, Ole Miss, 8-2. They lost to Georgia. Everybody loses to Georgia, so we don't hold that too hard against them. And they've got 8 wins, so they're doing all right. Number 3, Missouri, also 8-2. They got a win over Tennessee. Tennessee is just on the cusp of being in this top 5. Last week, they even were in the top 5. But Missouri not only beat them, but they beat them pretty bad. They put the smack down on them, gave them a good spanking. So kudos to you, Missouri. This is the best season I've seen from you guys in a long time. Enjoy your number 3 spot. Number 2, Alabama, 9-1. They got the win over UK. Kentucky is slightly above average as far as SEC teams go. That being said, Alabama schooled them, and their only loss on the season is to Texas. So 9-1 Alabama at number 2. Number 1, we've got the 10-0 Georgia, reigning defending champions, national champions, with a win over Ole Miss, who is a great team in their own right. So these Georgia Bulldogs, they're for real. They are for real, and no one's taking that away from them. I don't see any scenario where they do not make the playoff. Dropping from rankings this week was Tennessee. But that's all I've got for you guys. Comment down below. Tell me who you think the 5 best teams in each Power 5 conference were, and I will see you guys next time. Like and subscribe.